In August of 1990, the U.S. launched a mission by the codename of Operation Desert Shield in the Middle East. Iraq, under the control of Saddam Hussein, was becoming more and more of a threat as they continued to harass countries such as Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Kuwait had originally been a part of the Ottoman Empire, which made Iraq believe that Kuwait's territory was rightfully theirs. In June of 1990, the CIA received reports of up to 30,000 Iraqi troops assembling on the borders of Kuwait. After Iraq began an invasion of Kuwait, the U.S. felt they needed to take action under the Carter Doctrine, which promised the U.S. would use military force to defend the Persian Gulf. The U.S. felt threatened by the invasion because they relied so heavily upon Kuwait and Saudi Arabia for oil supply. President George W. Bush sent forces to Saudi Arabia and Kuwait in an attempt to stop Iraqi forces from invading any farther. President Bush initially declared the U.S.'s involvement to be wholly defensive, but this quickly changed when the conflict progressed. The U.S. Navy used the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and the USS Independence, which were two aircraft carriers that were dispatched to the Persian Gulf. The Air Force also contributed many planes and jets that were used for the border protection of Kuwait. The National Guard sent many air units that were used for bombings and also to transport supplies. Ground units were sent in to protect the borders and perform various tasks, including the 12th Engineer Battalion. The 12th Engineer Battalion can be traced back to as early as July 1st, 1940, when it was activated at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. In 1944, the 12th Engineer Battalion, along with the 8th Infantry Division, was deployed to the European theater as part of World War II. The 12th Engineer Battalion continued to take part in various military conflicts such as World War II, the defense and liberation of Kuwait, along with other Gulf War tasks, and other conflicts in Southeast Asia. Their shield is shown as a red badge with a well-constructed bridge consisting of 5 arches. The battalion motto was Id Proficimus, which translates to "We shall consummate the task." The red coloring of the shield is known to represent the Corps of Engineers, while the bridge represents the unit strength and strong bond. The battalion, working along with the 3rd Infantry Division, won multiple streamers for their heroics in the European theater, Luxembourg, as well as a Presidential Citation streamer for their actions in the Battle of Hergen Forest. Originally part of the 8th Infantry Division, the 12th Engineer Battalion was deployed from Dexheim, Germany to Southwest Asia as part of the 3rd Armored Division. Colonel John Morris was put in charge of the 12th Engineer Battalion during the Desert Storm. The majority of the battalion arrived in Saudi Arabia in mid-January of 1991, remaining there until around mid-May of 1991. The battalion was deployed in support of Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm to support the maneuver brigades as the mission required, according to Stephen Allen Bork, author of Jayhawk, the 7 Corps in the Persian Gulf. More specifically, the 12th Engineer Battalion was formed in King Khalid Military City, or KKMC, where some members of the battalion were assigned to work with the 3-8 Cavalry Battalion. The 3-8 Cavalry Battalion was an armored battalion that was designed as a task force. The battalion consisted of artillery units, engineers, and several other combat service units. After the task force was formed in KKMC, they headed out of Saudi Arabia and into the western desert of Iraq. Their journey was just beginning. As the 3-8 Cavalry unit traveled, they were given many tasks. Their main goal was to defend and protect the northern border of Kuwait. The borders of Kuwait were oftentimes where most of the combat took place because the Iraqi forces continued to invade Kuwait. One soldier describes the war at the borders as having furious pace and utter devastation in his journal. Other missions were more specific, such as this one from a military write-up. It says, "The mission of 3-8 Cavalry on rotor 3-8 Cav moves to, secures, and defends forward assembly area butts. 3-8 Cav attacks in zone on order as part of the division, advance guard to seize objective Collins, destroy the Republican Guard Forces Command, and defend northern Kuwait. The battalion, consisting of artillery units, engineer companies, and other service units, was also given the task to destroy anti-tank weapons with the help of close air support and eventually bypass the enemy obstacles that were set up to the west. The armored battalion was instructed to only breach as a last resort. When the battalion arrived and established itself at Forward Assembly Area Butts, or FAA Butts, on February 16, 1991, they began to prepare for combat and other operations. They knew their day was coming. The battalion sat and waited 8 days until G-Day. G-Day is a term used for the start of the ground war in any military conflict. February 24th was G-Day for Operation Desert Storm. The 3/8 Cavalry Unit was up early in the morning with a lot of ground to cover ahead of them. The battalion was ordered to move along Route Mustang for the day, stopping to get supplies when needed until they reached the border between Iraq and Saudi Arabia, otherwise known as their line of departure. They crossed over into Iraq and set up camp for the night, forming a safe perimeter around them, traveling a total of 75 kilometers that day. February 25, 1991, the 3/8 Cavalry Unit continued into Iraq to join forces with the 4/8 Cavalry Unit, a tank battalion, and also to join with the 4/7 Cavalry Unit. The three units quickly advanced through checkpoints traveling side by side. No enemy contact was initiated. However, the units could feel that they were getting closer. Their suspicions were confirmed when a colonel captures one enemy prisoner of war, or EPW. All units call it a night after traveling 52 kilometers that day. February 26, 1991. The 3/8 Cavalry continued to advance alongside the 4/7 Cavalry and the 4/8 Tank Battalion. They continue along their path until they receive intel that they are approaching an enemy position. The three battalions link up with yet another cavalry unit, the 432 AR, and readjust their strategy. The 3/8 Cavalry is reassigned to attack due east when instructed. The units get to 4 kilometers from the enemy position, still without a shot fired. One source recalls, at 1424, additional update advised of tanks and howitzers dug in along the brigade axis. The enemy returns fire as the combat carries over into the nighttime. With different companies shuffling around between the 3/8 Cavalry and the 4/8 Cavalry, friendly fire was a great concern on the American side, especially in the dark. Battalion scouts continued to identify enemy trucks and tanks, allowing their tank units to destroy various enemy vehicles. February 27, 1991. Caught slightly off guard by an early morning advancement, the battalions were scrambling to get themselves organized. Sergeant Larry Dunson, commander of Tank Company D, came to the rescue by leading his company out in front of the rest of the units, being the first to engage the enemy as they attacked. While Dunson and his company fought off the enemy, the rest of the battalion was able to get in position, ready to fight. For his heroics, Sergeant Dunson received the Bronze Star with V device, a prestigious award given for acts of valor. Around 6:30, enemy tanks could be spotted. As the morning wore on, the 4/8 tank unit engaged over 11 tanks. Specifically, Henry Casey, a tank gunner, destroyed 3 enemy tanks and earned himself the Bronze Star with V device. The 3/8 Cavalry unit continued fighting throughout the day. Caught in a bad spot with 2 enemy tanks closing in on them, C Company swooped in and destroyed the tanks, allowing the battalion to capture 15 surrendering enemy prisoners of war. Requested air support showed up just in time when the battalion scouts spotted 2 more tanks that were promptly destroyed by missiles. The battalion fired, marking other enemy vehicles for their air support to successfully destroy. As combat drew to an end, the 3/8 Cavalry unit captured a few more enemy prisoners of war, with the rest fleeing. The battalion established a perimeter and packed it in for the night. The 3/8 Cavalry unit did not suffer a single casualty during combat. February 28, 1991, the battalion received orders that they were clearing the area due to the fact that the war was ending. The battalion was tasked with clearing the Iraqi assembly area. Many valuable documents were discovered and reported, as well as supplies and ammunition. The battalion came across the occasional enemy tank or vehicle, which was destroyed, and also acquired about 30 more enemy prisoners of war. The ceasefire was issued at 8 a.m. on February 28, 1991, ending the conflict. Over the previous 4 days, members of the 12th Engineer Battalion, as part of the 3-8 Cavalry Unit, traveled a total of 232 kilometers. 4 days of ground combat is all it took for a ceasefire to be reached. Darren Boos, a psychological operations team sergeant, admits, "It seemed as though no time had passed when we heard over the radio that a ceasefire had been declared," but also says that everyone was physically and mentally exhausted. This is a short interview that I was able to do with a family friend who is a member of the 12th Engineer Battalion, assigned to be the task engineer for the 3-8 Cavalry Task Force.
I'm ready to go through whatever you want to go through to the best of my ability, sir, and you just lead and I shall follow.
Okay, so you enlisted, is that correct?
That is not correct. I went to officer candidate school.
Okay, and what was the motivation for doing that?
Yeah, I think it kind of became a reality to me that serving in the military was the right fit for me. I had a good friend that was a little bit older than me. I went to college with and went into ROTC, and and I stayed in contact after he graduated, and he was off in Hawaii, stationed there, doing some just kind of cool stuff. And as we communicated, and I kind of heard what he was doing, it just kind of really started to make me think that was a good fit for me. So I pursued that, thinking that it would be an interesting career, serving in the military in the officer corps.
Okay. And when you were serving, did you travel around, or were you more in one place?
Well, I mean, my whole sequence went from starting some training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, to Fort Benning, Georgia, to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to Dexheim, Germany. Dexheim from Germany is when I deployed to the Operation Desert Storm into the Middle East. Returned to Germany. Once I came back from Germany, went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. After Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, a little bit more time at Fort Benning, Georgia, and then from Fort Benning, Georgia to Fort Hood, Texas. And that was kind of the whole path of my military career.
Okay. And how did you keep in touch with your family at home while you were traveling around?
Yeah, true. I mean, it was the old days when we would actually write letters sometimes and fairly occasionally call. It was not like there was FaceTime or Skype or any of that kind of stuff back then. And so, yeah, it was a little bit more old school. So the calls were a little bit more infrequent because it was pretty expensive to call overseas. And so writing letters and making phone calls now and again.
All right. Do you have a most memorable moment that you have from while you were serving?
Well, I mean, not the specific moment, but I would say that the time that I spent over in the Middle East during the Operation Desert Storm, so about a 5-month period, I was there from January to May. That was probably the most rewarding because in the period leading up to that, we hadn't really been in a major conflict in the United States. We had a couple small conflicts, one in Grenada, one down in Panama, where not a lot of forces had been deployed. So the majority of our time was spent training. We were still, when I first started in the Army, we were still in the Cold War. So all of our training revolved around this kind of mythical World War III that would take place between us and the Soviet Union, the two superpowers. And so our whole training plan was geared towards that type of warfare. And then, but that was all it was. It was just theory of how we would conduct that type of war on a scale that was similar to that of World War II, or some major land battles on the European and Asian continent and wherever else that might take place. But that obviously never came to fruition. And so all that time leading up to Desert Storm was just training, and then we actually got to put into reality or we're gonna actually play a game, and it's gonna count. It's gonna be real. We're gonna keep score, and there's gonna be a winner and a loser. And so that was really kind of it was the reality of what we did as service members.
Okay, just one more question. Do you still keep in touch with any of the people that you served with?
Yeah, still have some friends, some good friends, and it's been a lot of years now, but we still stay in touch here and there, and there's something about people who have served, so even whether it was those that I served with who I do still keep in touch with, or just somebody you may meet and strike up a conversation with and come to discover that they served as well in a similar time or in a similar place, and there's kind of almost an instant camaraderie. But yeah, still keep in touch with quite a few people that I served with back then, and still friends, because once you go through that together, you kind of have that lifelong bond, and it's a pretty good thing.
Okay. We thank you for your time and your service.